"Hands behind your back! You're under arrest!" The officer's voice cut through the courtroom like a gunshot, sharp and sudden. The words stopped everyone mid-breath. Heads turned, cameras flashed wildly. The man sitting confidently at the prosecutor's table didn't flinch. His eyes held steady, unshaken by the accusation. The room thickened with disbelief, confusion blooming like a storm just beneath the surface. A woman whispered, "Did he really just say that?" Another shifted uncomfortably. The polished wood floors reflected the tension that rippled through the gathered crowd. Journalists leaned forward, pens poised, waiting for the next move. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged with questions, judgments, and unspoken unease. The officer's grip tightened as he reached for the man's arm. His eyes were cold, a mask of authority forged by years of unquestioned power. He spoke without looking. "Step down now." His voice held no room for explanation, only command. There was no recognition in his glare, only assumption, a prejudice unseen but deeply felt. The man's hand moved slowly, deliberately, pulling a set of official papers from beneath a stack on the desk. The seal of the federal prosecutor's office gleamed in the harsh lights. His voice was low, calm, and firm. "You're making a mistake." It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a demand. It was a statement of fact. A hush fell over the courtroom. The cop blinked, surprise flickering just beneath his rigid facade. Around them, the crowd held its breath, caught in the moment before the storm. The man's eyes locked on the officers, a silent challenge, a quiet reclaiming of space. Neither spoke, but the shift was palpable. Justice, long delayed, was waking. The walls held stories no one wanted to hear, files unopened, complaints buried beneath years of silence. "They never listened," a voice muttered in the back room, barely above a whisper. Each paper stacked high was a testament to forgotten pain, to faces erased by a system built to protect itself. The names written there weren't just ink, they were lives silenced by neglect. He remembered those faces, the ones who vanished after their pleas fell on deaf ears. It was a quiet injustice, heavy and relentless. Behind closed doors, whispers traced the edges of corruption. "The evidence doesn't disappear on its own," someone said, voice low and cautious. In shadowed offices, deals were struck, favors exchanged and truths concealed. A fortress of silence surrounded those in power, shielding them from accountability. He knew this game well, the unspoken rules that kept the system intact, no matter the cost. Watching it unravel felt like witnessing a slow collapse, as if the fortress was cracking beneath its own weight. Small moments told stories louder than words. A glance turned away just a second too late, a dismissive smirk, voices that dropped when he entered a room. Microaggressions built walls higher than laws ever could. "Just another case," they'd say. But each slight cut deepened. Wounds unseen, fractures in the foundation of dignity. He carried them all, silent bruises from 1,000 tiny cuts. A voice broke through the quiet halls. This could blow the whole case open. The reporter's words trembled with possibility. Nearby, an internal affairs officer hesitated, caught between fear and duty. "It's all there," he admitted quietly. Then a victim stepped forward, soft-spoken, raw with emotion. Their confession pierced the silence, a spark in the dark. He held his calm tightly, though inside, a storm raged. The faces in his community flickered between hope and fear. They waited, watched, suffered, quiet resilience against a relentless tide. The fight wasn't loud. It was steady, forged in hearts that refused to break. Then the spark ignited. Video, unfiltered and raw, spread like wildfire. Screens lit up with outrage. Voices rose in demand. The slow crack of the system grew louder, shaking foundations long thought unbreakable. Those once standing by began to falter. Whispers replaced defenses. Eyes shifted uncomfortably. Allies retreated, distancing themselves. Power showed signs of crumbling as collective conscience stirred awake. The tide was turning, slowly, quietly, but inevitably. News traveled in whispers at first. "He's been suspended," someone said low in the hallways, voices barely carrying over the hum of the courthouse. The cop who'd made the arrest now faced scrutiny, not with loud protests, but with slow, certain consequences. Internal investigations began quietly, peeling back layers of silence and privilege that had long protected him. The system was fracturing, fragile in ways no one had dared to admit before. Trust, once implicit, now wavered under the weight of mounting evidence and public pressure. Change was stirring, not with a bang, but with a steady, relentless push. The man walked through familiar streets, the places of his youth. Faces that once turned away now met his with nods, shy smiles that held a quiet acknowledgement. He felt the weight of every scar, visible and hidden, that marked his journey. There was no celebration, only a soft glow of hope kindled by slow, patient healing. The neighborhood seemed to breathe differently, as if scarred but not broken, resilient in the face of its past wounds. Each step was a reminder that progress was often measured in small moments, fragile but true. A neighbor's eyes caught his, briefly, then dropped away. The silence between them carried years of unspoken regret and cautious hope. Slowly, a hand reached out, a tentative bridge across a gulf of distance. The man accepted the gesture, the weight of fractured relationships, pressing quietly between them. His phone buzzed with unanswered messages, blank spaces where connection once lived. The gaps in words mirrored the complexities of healing, where silence spoke volumes and reconciliation moved at its own pace. Inside, the man felt the solitude of his role. Leadership demanded dignity amidst exhaustion and sacrifice. He carried the weight of battles fought against an unyielding system, his calm masking a fierce determination. The fight was lonely, marked by quiet resilience that fueled him when the world seemed silent or hostile. Narration laid bare this internal struggle, the cost of standing firm when justice demanded more than words or noise. "Justice is patient," he whispered in a moment of stillness, "but it never forgets those who refuse to be silent." Around him, the world shifted subtly. Murals bloomed on walls, protest signs fluttered in gentle winds, schools renewed promises of hope. The fight was far from over, but the tide was turning, slowly, inevitably, with quiet strength. The files sat in dusty cabinets, forgotten by those who should have acted. "They never listen," whispered a voice down a quiet hallway, barely audible over the hum of the courthouse. Paper after paper, complaint after complaint, stacked and ignored. Faces faded from memory, erased by a system built to protect itself. Each name on those pages was a person, someone whose pain was buried beneath official silence. He thought of them often, the unheard, the unseen, discarded like shadows in a room full of light. Their voices had been swallowed whole by walls that refused to speak. Behind the closed doors, deals were made in whispers. "We handle it internally," a cold voice said in a locked office. A memo passed hands. Evidence vanished. The corruption was subtle but relentless, a quiet fortress built to shield those in power. The system was designed not to serve justice, but to protect itself. He knew this dance well, how truth was twisted, how facts were buried, how loyalty blinded those sworn to fairness. Watching this decay in silence was painful, but exposing it could cost everything. Still, the weight of silence was heavier. Small, nearly invisible cuts happened every day. A glance that lingered too long, a sarcastic smile disguised as a joke, community voices sidelined or ignored. Another case, they'd say dismissively, as if people's lives were mere numbers. But those tiny wounds added up, building walls stronger than any law. He carried those invisible scars, quiet reminders of battles fought in places no one noticed. They weren't just words, they were blows, and they left marks no one else could see. A voice cracked the silence. This could change everything. A reporter's whisper in a crowded hallway, full of tension and hope. Nearby, an internal affairs officer hesitated, torn between fear and duty. "The proof is there," he admitted softly. And then a victim stepped forward, voice trembling, but firm, breaking years of silence. The fight was no longer quiet. He stood quietly, watching the faces around him. Some stared with anger, others with sorrow, many with a mix of confusion and fear. The community was wounded, and they carried their pain in silent ways. "We've been waiting for this," a woman murmured softly. Her voice was cracked, worn from years of holding back tears and rage. The weight of injustice settled heavily over the room, pressing on hearts already bruised. The man's voice was calm but resolute as he spoke to a small gathering. "I know this isn't easy. It never is. But silence only lets them win." There was no shout, no demand, just quiet strength. His words floated between them, a fragile but steady bridge toward hope. People nodded, some wiping away tears, others clenching fists in silent agreement. The fight was not just his. It belonged to every person who had been ignored, dismissed, or worse. Outside, the spark ignited. A video, raw and unedited, showed the moment of arrest. Phones lit up across the city, messages spread like wildfire. "Did you see this?" one voice asked. "This changes everything," another whispered. The footage captured not just the event, but the underlying truth, a truth too long buried. Social media erupted, voices rising in a chorus demanding accountability and change. The quiet system began to crack under the pressure of a world no longer willing to look away. Inside, the allies shifted uncomfortably. "We need to rethink," a colleague whispered, avoiding eye contact. "This isn't what we expected." The power circle started to fray as doubts crept in. Quiet glances replaced bold defenses, and hesitation grew where certainty once stood. The fortress of privilege showed cracks, signaling the slow collapse of an old order. He looked around the room, sensing the shift. Where once there was unwavering support for the status quo, now there were cracks, silent hesitations, averted eyes. "We have to be careful," a voice muttered from the back, barely audible. The usual certainty was fading, replaced by doubt and fear of exposure. The allies who stood beside the cop began to distance themselves slowly, one by one, as whispers grew louder and loyalty wavered. In the corner, a staff member swallowed hard, watching the unfolding unraveling with a mix of relief and anxiety. The walls that once protected the powerful no longer seemed impenetrable. Each whispered conversation chipped away at the fortress of privilege. The quiet withdrawal was more devastating than any public confrontation, proof that the system's foundation was weakening from within. He remained composed, eyes steady, absorbing the atmosphere. His calm dignity spoke louder than any protest. In this quiet room, power was shifting, not with a bang, but a slow, unstoppable tide. Around him the energy changed. Some leaned in, hopeful, others recoiled, uncertain. The battle was far from over, but the first steps toward accountability had been taken. A brief pause filled the space, heavy with meaning. No one rushed to fill the silence. Then, with a subtle nod, the prosecutor acknowledged the room, a silent signal that the fight was just beginning, that the truth would no longer be buried. The courtroom breathed in that moment, a shared recognition of change. Outside, the world waited, watching, ready to see if justice would truly rise. And within those walls, history was quietly being made, one steady step at a time.